Expanding our worldview. Okay, so deciding whether or not we are in the last days according to Bible prophecy assumes that you already have decided to believe that Bible prophecy is true. So how do we know that the Bible is true, and how do we know that Christianity is the right religion? So we look at what's out there and figure it all out and logically make a decision, right? So putting forth a logical argument on the validity of a belief system is called apologetics. It doesn't have anything to do with how we think of apology these days, which is, I'm sorry, it's not that. It's apologetics, and the word apology means to explain yourself logically. So there are many ways to approach Christian apologetics. Some theologians use science and might start with the intelligent design versus evolution argument, which is excellent. Some use historical records to validate the stories in the Bible. I'm going to start with something called hermetic philosophy and a very, very ancient worldview. We are going to explore some of the other religions in the world and throw in some theoretical physics. I love physics. Again, you can't read yourself fast. If I say stuff that's scary, it's okay. How do we know that the Bible's true? Let's talk about the Bible. What is it? It's a collection of 66 books divided into the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is the Jewish scripture, and the New Testament is the life of Christ in the early church. What's the oldest book in the Bible? It's not the first book, Genesis. Moses wrote the first 5 books. Job actually lived way before Moses, and the book of Job is the oldest. Book of Job is so old that it describes things that predate history, such as dragons and dinosaurs. So, and for this one, for Job, you have to get. I like the Living Bible. I use the Living Bible a lot because it's easy to understand. But for Job, to get the old stuff, you need the old King James because it doesn't change Leviathan to crocodile or whatever. So right here, let me show you here. Okay, in the newer translations, the word behemoth is, I think, translated to elephant. But listen and tell me if this sounds like an elephant. Behold now behemoth which I made with thee, he eateth grass like an ox. His strength is in his loins. He moves his tail like a cedar. What's an elephant tail like? Is an elephant tail like a cedar tree? No. And it goes on to describe what you could only think would be one of those big plant-eating dinosaurs. Yeah. What are they called?
Brontosaurus?
Brontosaurus. Yeah, something like that. I mean, it totally describes this. He drinks up a river and, all this stuff. So, and then in chapter 41 of Job, it talks about what sounds like dragon. And it's interesting because every ancient culture had dragon myths. Right? China has dragons. Europe had dragons, the knights were always going to try to kill the dragon. All these different cultures had these dragon myths. Well, maybe they weren't a myth. And let me read you this, because this is the newer translations say crocodile. Tell me if this sounds like a crocodile. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook or his tongue with a cord? So they're like fishing, right? Can you put a hook into his nose or bore his jaw with a thorn? Let's go down here. Can you fill his skin with barbed irons, with his head with fish spears? Lay thy hand on him and remember the battle and do no more. It says, who can open the doors of his face? His teeth are terrible, round about. His scales are his pride, shut up together with a close seal. So he does have scales. One is so near to another that no air comes between them. They are joined together and stick together. His eyes are like the eyelids. Here we go. Out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goes smoke, out of a seething pot or cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and flames go out of his mouth. So, and then it goes on and keeps describing him. He makes the deep to boil like a pot. He makes the sea like a pot that's boiling. So, okay, you have this water creature. And it's very, very possible. And there's this beetle right now. It's called the bombardier beetle. It's native to Maryland, actually. I think it's rare. But it's there. And it has 2 tubes in this beetle that when it's scared, it shoots 2 different chemicals out that combine together, and it's like 300 degrees or something. You remember that, Jones? It's like past the boiling point. So if you scare this bombardier beetle, it goes psh, and it'll totally burn your hand. I mean, it comes out like, because the two different chemicals combine together and cause a chemical reaction to do that. So if you ever saw some of these pictures of these dinosaurs, they have these long tube things on their heads, right? Well, who's to say that those tube things weren't for these bombardier beetle type chemicals? We know the bombardier beetle exists. It still exists. So the bombardier beetle can do that. What if there was a dinosaur that could do that? You would call that a fire-breathing dragon. So then all of these myths from China to Europe to where, all these, dragons probably existed. Probably dragons did exist, because guess what? The Bible says dragons existed. It was called Leviathan. And Job is the book of Job is how old? Like 5,000 to 6,000 years old. Our history doesn't go back that far unless it's the Bible. So, yeah. So some of it also talks about unicorns, but I won't get into that. So anyhow, all that to say, the Bible is very old. But what did the people believe before the Bible was written? Because aside from the book of Job, most of the Bible isn't that old. The New Testament's 2,000 years old. What did the people believe before that? What about before Moses? Before Moses gave the Ten Commandments? Way back when, how did God deal with people? Did God just throw everybody in hell from Noah to Abraham? I don't believe that. He dealt with them somehow. He revealed himself to them somehow. He didn't go hundreds of years just silent, letting people just wander around. So, what did they believe? How did God reveal himself to them? Here is what most of the world believed, although it was called different things to different people. Most of these truths have been lost to our society, our modern society. Most of these teachings have been twisted into representing something else and have been labeled heresy or witchcraft to the organized church, because the church, as an organization, went around killing the Arabs and the Jews and the Wiccans and whoever else they could, just burning people at the stake and stabbing them and carrying on. That was the church, right? Christians, the organized Christians, were the terrorists of their day. Now, how we have these terrorist Muslims today. Today, most Christians have never heard of this belief system, although it formed the basis of most of the world's religions. And now in this era of modern physics, specifically in this time of quantum physics, this belief system can be validated. It's very, very scientific. What is it? It's Hermetic philosophy. This is why I'm all excited about Hermetic philosophy, because most of the different tenets of Hermetic philosophy can be scientifically proven. Hermetics is the name of the school of thought that was first attributed to a guy named Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes was a teacher in ancient Egypt, and he was deified by the Egyptians. They called him Thoth. So if you've seen pictures of the ancient Egyptian god Thoth, he has that Ankh thing that looks like a cross with a loop at the top. You picked up one of those books out there? Yeah, show the Ankh. Have you ever seen that? That's a symbol of Thoth. The Greeks called him Mercury because they said he was the messenger of the gods. He brought knowledge from the Greek gods to the people they thought. So Thoth, Mercury, Hermes, whatever you want to call him, same person. He's said to be contemporary of Abraham, the Jewish patriarch Abraham. So Hermes and Abraham allegedly shared information. That's a legend. We don't know for sure if it's true. But what we do have are what's left of the teachings that have been attributed to Hermes. And they have permeated every culture that ever lived right down to today. Have you ever heard of the term hermit? A hermit was somebody who went away by themselves to study Hermetic philosophy. And in medieval times, that got mixed into alchemy. So a lot of times the alchemists were hermits. The alchemists were trying to transmute lead into gold and things like that. The great work of alchemy is to become more and more like God. We put it this way because it sounds nicer, to become more Christ-like. But they wanted to do it in a more practical way. They wanted to become more like God because they wanted more powers. Not necessarily a bad thing. Right away we say, oh, they want power, they must be evil, they're going to, they just want gold, or they just want, power, take over. Not necessarily. Well, you want the good guys or the bad guys to have power? right? If you're a good guy, you should want power because the bad guys are trying to get power, right? So, the hermits were people who were seeking to become more like God, to become more Christ-like, to be more sanctified and holy, and therefore more powerful. And then, of course, we still have our term hermetically sealed because it was loose lips sink ships, and the hermits knew it. So, what did Hermes teach? He is best known for a piece of literature called the Emerald Tablet. It's a collection of verses that in the Middle Ages permeated the art of alchemy, where ancient scientists tried to turn lead into gold by a process called transmutation. Hermes' best known phrase is "as above, so below." You mostly hear that in Wiccan circles, "as above, so below." It's in the New Age circles, they use that a lot. Students of Hermetic philosophy passed down the teachings of Hermes orally for centuries, rarely writing anything down until a document called the Kabbalah appeared in 1908 by anonymous authors who simply referred to themselves as the three initiates. And it's been a very secretive thing. And of late, you may have heard of a movie called The Secret. And back a couple decades ago, you may have heard a Earl Nightingale recording called The Strangest Secret. And all of those teachings, the secret, the actual secret is that thoughts are things. And when you think about something, and when you are totally convinced of something, it can happen. Jesus said, yes, and Jesus said, believe, and it's done for you. If you have faith the grain of a mustard seed, you can move a mountain. Belief is powerful. Thoughts are things, and it's all about believing it. What did the people that wanted to be healed, they believed it and they were healed. It's the belief. So, in order to have the power to heal, you have to have the belief behind it. You have to have the authority in your personality in order to pull that off. That's faith, is how we put it. We can frame these same concepts using Christian terms or pagan terms. And what I want to show is that the science behind it is all the same. And you want to give God the glory for it. But it's okay to understand that the scientific concept is the same, whether you call it belief and faith, or whether you call it, as above, so below, or whatever, however you frame that. The Kabbalah is a practical manual of Hermetic philosophy that teaches to raise vibrations and keep your thoughts consistently at high levels, to transmute bad situations into your life into good ones, similar to the now popular law of attraction. The law of attraction is another way to put that. It's the movie The Secret. I have copies of The Secret back there. The Secret is a New Age type film. When you watch it, you'll have to not be offended by the New Age terminology. But it's really a wealth of information, scientifically speaking, on the law of attraction, because it is. Thoughts are things, and it's all about belief. In the next few weeks, we're going to cover the 7 principles of Hermetic philosophy, which is ancient magic or ancient technology. And first, because modern science is discovering that it's all true, I want to give a little brief overview of physics. Magic and miracles are names for phenomena or technology that has not been discovered yet, not been explained yet. So there's 2 sets of rules of physics: general relativity, quantum mechanics. So classical physics, what we're all familiar with, that's general relativity. It's the laws of gravity that we're familiar with. It's the laws of thermodynamics that we're familiar with. And all these things that pertain to large objects. Isaac Newton, apple falling on his head, that's gravity, that's general relativity. Albert Einstein, discovering that gravity and acceleration are the same thing, that's general relativity. Thermodynamics is classic physics as well. That's the cause and effect. Things in motion stay in motion. Things at rest stay at rest. Entropy, the things break down rather than get more organized. They cool down rather than heat up. They lose energy. And these are all obvious laws of nature that we know every day we use them. They're second nature to us, even if we don't know who discovered what, even if we don't know it's called entropy. We know that, if you build a shed and then don't paint it and don't do anything to it, it's going to rot. So that's entropy. We all know these things even if we don't know what they're called, because we live in the world of classical physics. We live in general relativity. If we trip and fall, we're going to hit the ground. We don't need to know it's classical physics. We know that that happens. But then there's quantum physics. There's quantum mechanics, the science of these little tiny subatomic particles, which are not subject to the laws of classical physics. These little subatomic particles are actually called wavicles, because they appear as either a particle or a wave, depending on what you want to see when you look at it. Isn't that wild? If you set up your experiment and you're trying to observe how a particle does this or that, it's going to look like a particle. If you set up your experiment to measure some sort of wave, it's going to look like a wave. So they're called wavicles. And they have all kinds of mysterious qualities. They can transmit information between them faster than the speed of light, which the speed of light's the speed limit in classical physics. You can't go faster than the speed of light. So, and they can occupy the same spot at the same time. They can pop in and out of existence, or seem to disappear, reappear in another spot instantly. This is all weird science, but it's science. It's, quantum mechanics. You can do experiments on it. It sounds weird. So scientists are discovering that the laws of quantum physics might not necessarily be for just tiny objects. Now here's where it gets exciting. It might apply on planetary scales as well, as they discover strange things about the universe. The quest for the last several decades has been to discover a unified field theory that encompasses general relativity and quantum mechanics to explain the whole thing. Because up until this point, stuff either worked this way or it worked that way, and we couldn't figure out why it couldn't work both ways. So that's what string theory and M theory is all about. They're trying to explain, it's their stab at trying to explain and reconcile these two different laws of the universe. And in the laws of the universe, in the universe in general, we have good and evil. We have light and darkness. We have this duality. So what the scientists see is the duality of nature. And let me get ahead of myself. So consider this. How subatomic wavicles behave would be considered magic if it was done on a human scale. We can't instantly pop from Baltimore to Los Angeles. We can't coordinate the vibration of the atoms in our hand with the vibration of the atoms in the table and pass our hand through the table. Or can we? Did somebody in the Bible pop from one spot to another and not really know how he got there? That happened a couple times. Philip, he was talking to the Ethiopian eunuch. All of a sudden, he just popped from Mesopotamia or wherever to some other spot. Right? It's in the New Testament. It's in the book of Acts. He just was somewhere else. And when Jesus was in the boat, I don't know if it was whether when he was calming the sea or whether he walked on water, but he got in the boat. I think it was when he was walking on water. He got in the boat and whoop, they were over at the other shore. Like instantly, right? They didn't row, they didn't sail, they were just, whoop, they were just there. So, it can be done. You can pop from Baltimore to Los Angeles if you know how to access quantum mechanics. So a miracle then would be defined as the use of quantum mechanics on a human scale. One who can do miracles would have mastery of knowing when to use relativity and when to use quantum mechanics. Magic is technology that has not yet been discovered. So after his resurrection, Jesus walked through a locked door, right? The disciples were all scared, the doors were locked, and they were scared of the government, and they were hiding out, and he just walked right in, locked door. After calming the storm, he caused the boat to pop, was said right across the Sea of Galilee, and they were there. And he arranged the molecules of water to become wine, right? Because everything's made of these strings of energy. Everything's just put together differently so that one thing is a book, and one thing's a computer, and one thing is your hand, and one thing's your hair. But it's all strings of energy that it's all made of. So he just arranged them so that it was wine instead of water. That was his very first miracle. That was his very first stepping out of relativity into quantum mechanics, because his mother said how embarrassed they're going to be. They ran out of wine. Can he do something about it? Because she knew he probably wasn't his first thing. She knew he could do it, right? Probably kind of did stuff at home. It was just a little weird. So she knew he could do that. And she just said, hey, you're out of wine. Hint, hint, wink, wink. And he was like, my time hasn't come. I'm not supposed to be doing this yet. She said, and he said, all right. So he turned water into wine, right? That's how it happened. So let's get back to hermetics and see how that ties in.